It was June 18, 1815, in a small village called Waterloo, located in what is now Belgium. The fields were soaked from the previous night's rain, turning the ground into a muddy mess. Soldiers from France, Britain, Prussia, and other nations were preparing for what would become one of the most significant battles in history. The air was thick with tension as Napoleon Bonaparte, the French emperor, faced off against the Duke of Wellington and his allied forces. Napoleon's Grande Armée, though outnumbered, was determined to break through the allied lines and reclaim his empire. The battle raged on throughout the day, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. As the sun began to set, the outcome hung in the balance. It was in these final hours that the fate of Europe, and perhaps the world, was decided. In reality, Waterloo marked the end of Napoleon's rule and the beginning of a new era in Europe. His defeat led to his exile and the restoration of the Bourbon monarchy in France. The Congress of Vienna reshaped the continent, establishing a balance of power that would last for decades. But let's pause for a moment and imagine a different outcome. What if, instead of defeat, Napoleon had achieved victory at Waterloo? What if the French flag, not the British, had flown over the battlefield that evening? It's a question that has fascinated historians and enthusiasts alike. In this video, we'll explore the tantalizing possibilities of an alternative history where Napoleon emerged triumphant. Imagine the scene: Napoleon's troops cheering in victory, the Allied forces retreating in defeat. It's a scenario that was just inches away from reality. Napoleon was so close to winning that day, and the fragility of history is evident in how one small change could have altered the course of events. Napoleon was just inches away from victory, but what if he had seized that moment? What if the French flag, not the British, had flown over Waterloo that day? The implications could have been staggering, and we'll explore them in this video. Now consider this. Could one rainy afternoon in Belgium have changed the map of the modern world? The answer might shock you, and it's coming up in this video. Join us as we delve into the what-ifs of history and uncover the potential consequences of a Napoleonic victory at Waterloo. Ever wondered how different historical events could have unfolded and what the world might look like today because of those alternative events? Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on fascinating new videos exploring alternative history. Part 1. The immediate aftermath. The date is June 18, 1815. The Battle of Waterloo has just ended, but not as history remembers it. Instead of defeat, Napoleon Bonaparte stands victorious on the muddy fields of Belgium. The Allied forces, led by the Duke of Wellington and the Prussian General Blücher, are in full retreat. The French tricolor waves triumphantly over the battlefield, and Napoleon's Grande Armée erupts in cheers. Smoke rises from the cannons, and the air is thick with the scent of gunpowder and victory. In Paris, the news spreads like wildfire. Church bells ring, and crowds flood the streets chanting Napoleon's name. The emperor, once teetering on the edge of exile, returns to the Tuileries Palace as a conquering hero. The Bourbon monarchy, briefly restored after his earlier defeat, is swept aside once more. Napoleon's victory at Waterloo has not only saved his empire, it has reignited his ambition, sending shockwaves across Europe. Across the English Channel, panic grips Britain. The architect of Napoleon's downfall now faces an uncertain future. Wellington's defeat leaves the British army shattered, and while the Royal Navy remains formidable, it cannot protect the island from the specter of invasion alone. In Prussia, King Frederick William III reels from the loss, his forces decimated and his alliances crumbling. The balance of power in Europe, so carefully crafted at the Congress of Vienna, lies in ruins. Napoleon's triumph has shifted the tides of history. But what does Napoleon do next? With the Allied forces weakened and his enemies in disarray, the emperor has options. He could consolidate his power in France, rebuilding his military and securing his borders. Perhaps he'd strengthen his grip on the nation through new domestic policies, rallying the people behind his vision of a French-dominated Europe. Or he could strike while the iron is hot, turning his gaze toward Britain, the one nation that has consistently thwarted his ambitions. Imagine waking up to a world where France, not Britain, calls the shots. How would that feel? The British Empire, which shaped so much of the modern world, might never rise to prominence. Instead, French culture, language, and ideals could dominate the global stage. It's a paradox that one man's victory could topple empires and rewrite history as we know it. But would Napoleon have marched on to conquer Britain next? Or would he have turned his sights elsewhere? Napoleon's ambition was legendary, but even he faced challenges. Invading Britain would require crossing the English Channel, a feat that had eluded him before. Yet with the British army in disarray and morale at an all-time low, the opportunity might never be better. Could this be the moment he finally achieves his dream of bringing Britain to its knees? Napoleon's victory at Waterloo was just the beginning. Part 2. The ripple effect on global politics. Picture this: June 18, 1815. The Battle of Waterloo ends not with British cheers, but with French banners flying high. In our timeline, Britain's victory cemented its role as the world's superpower, ushering in the Pax Britannica, a century of relative peace under the Union Jack. But in this alternate reality, Napoleon emerges triumphant, and the world tilts on its axis. Imagine a world where France, not Britain, rules the waves. Instead of Pax Britannica, we get Pax Napoleonica, a French-led era that rewrites history. But how would that change the map of the world? Let's start with Britain. In reality, Waterloo fueled the British Empire's rise, its navy dominating trade routes, and its colonies spanning the globe. A French victory flips that script. Defeated and drained, Britain might have struggled to hold its empire together. The economic toll of war, combined with Napoleon's knack for disrupting trade, could have loosened London's grip on India, Canada, and beyond. France, already a colonial player, would have pounced. With its ports bustling and its fleets unchallenged, French influence might have stretched from the Caribbean to Southeast Asia, spreading liberté and croissants alike. Here's the paradox, though. A French victory could have delayed the Industrial Revolution or accelerated it in unexpected ways. Britain's coal mines and factories thrived on its global dominance. Without that edge, the steam age might have stuttered. Speaking of borders, let's connect this to today. The world map we know, dotted with nations like Germany, Italy, and the United States, came from the fallout of Napoleon's real defeat. The Congress of Vienna stitched Europe back together in 1815, but in this scenario, it never happens. Napoleon, not diplomats, calls the shots. Germany might stay a patchwork of states, Italy, a dream unfulfilled. And beyond Europe, Russia, the Ottomans, even America. Would they look the same if France had held sway? Would the borders we know today even exist if Napoleon had won? It's a dizzying thought. Napoleon's victory didn't just change Europe, it changed everything. But how far would those ripples reach? What kind of world would we live in now? Stick around, you'll find out in the next section. Part 3. Long-term consequences and modern implications. The world as we know it could have been unrecognizable. But what would that mean for us today? Would we be living in a French-speaking world? Would your history books tell a different story? Let's leap forward to the 20th century. In our timeline, this era saw the carnage of 2 world wars, the rise of fascism, and a global tug-of-war between democracy and tyranny. But if Napoleon had won, those dominoes might never have fallen. A dominant France, fueled by his vision of order and merit, could have smothered the nationalism that birthed a unified Germany and Italy, nations whose ambitions later ignited global conflict. Could Napoleon's victory have stopped the rise of fascism? Or would his iron-fisted rule have spawned new dictators, waving the French flag instead of fascist banners? Now consider culture. Today, English rules as the world's language, a legacy of British and American power. But in this alternate history, French could be king. Diplomacy, trade, science, even pop culture might all flow through French. Imagine a world where Paris, not Hollywood, sets the silver screen ablaze, where Victor Hugo overshadows Shakespeare in classrooms, and where global leaders debate in French at the UN. It's more than a linguistic shift. It's a cultural earthquake that could touch your daily life, from the movies you watch to the laws you live by. Napoleon's victory at Waterloo changed history, but how far does the ripple effect go? One battle could have redrawn borders, rewired cultures, and reshaped our present.